a little bit off.
Yeah.
So I'm refining the design and changing it from a square edge to like a rouleau triangle kind of edge. So those are a little bit thicker and also turn more smoothly, I think, in metal.
How'd you come up with the design?
Trial and error. Like this was experimenting with cubes, linking them together and seeing how they move.
So you didn't know what it was going to be when you started?
No, I mean I was making this originally out of plastic using Zoma tool. It's like a building toy. So I was constructing a chain of corners would have been annoying to get it to roll like. Yeah, well, I was making out of plastic pieces, joining together a couple cubes just to start off with, to try to make like a universal joint type connection for a kinetic sculpture where I can change the angles between them and rotate them. And then I like added another one to it, and as I was making this chain of them, I found that I could link the last one around to the front, and it just barely clears itself and rotates.
And so when you go into a project like this, you don't really know exactly what the end product is going to be.
Until I finish welding it, I have no idea how it's going to behave. A lot of these are experiments, and until it's done, especially the kinetic pieces, I don't know how it's going to behave. And it's really sort of exciting to go into doing this where, like, I know I'm going to learn something from it, and it may not end up doing what I expect it to do or want it to do, but it almost always ends up being worthwhile and worth experimenting with. Like this was an experiment with linked rods, and it has some interesting movement. But I really like the way it lines up when it's sitting down, because like the way it can arrange. But when you pick it up, it sort of bunches together, and that's interesting. But it's not quite hanging the way that I wanted it to. So I went from this to this sculpture where they're linked together and it's fixed so that they hold those relationships throughout.
And then you have this one that only has two.
Yeah, this was my original actually, where I was making sketches in wire. This was originally an idea for a piece of jewelry, like a necklace or something like that. I was coming up with different wire ideas and making sketches like this, but I would get really excited like with this model, and like this is another little wire model, and this is another one. But I would get really excited about turning them into steel sculptures, so I would go from these small jewelry scale pieces to scaling them up to welding them into these larger pieces.
So you're on a quest to learn how to do things, and you're doing it by making things.
Yes. And as I'm making things, I learn all sorts of new and exciting things that give me ideas for the next set of things. So the things I'm working on now, I hadn't even thought of making before I started making these things. So it's an iterative process where as I'm doing it, I'm learning the next thing. So it's important to really just jump in and just start making things, and that's how you find out where to go.
That's neat. Yeah. So making things helps you make more things, and helps you learn about what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, and even things that don't work are instructive and really useful. Like when I was making this piece, I originally made it with larger rings, like about this size, and it was a lot looser and just didn't really form coherent patterns as well. So I pulled those off and added the small rings and made this with fewer of these rods. But the spacing of it was wrong, so that these wouldn't move very far. Like the rings would be spaced like this. I can move them back and forth like that. So I added in some more rods. Like I cut it open, added more in, and then it was too many, and it also wasn't working well. So I removed it and went back to got it to have this many. So it was this whole process of like trying it out, welding it together, seeing how it works, cutting it apart, changing it, and learning from it. And then going from this to these other pieces. But there's a lot of experimentation. Like this one originally started off as something that was going to be hanging like this, which it does also work like this. I'm still kind of playing around with it. but it wasn't quite behaving the way that I wanted it to. So then I went from there to hanging it like this and getting it to have this sort of form where it's suspended from itself rather than hanging and spacing them apart from each other.
And so what about speed and figuring things out? How is that a factor? Like, a design like this is in steel, it's real robust, durable, but also very time consuming.
Yeah.
Whereas these models here look like they're much less robust but quicker.
They're much quicker. Some of the properties scale up well to the steel, but other things don't. So I don't know. Like especially like with this, like, the weight of it makes a big difference. So I don't really know how it's gonna behave. But like these are time consuming, but it's not like a week. It's more like a day, like start to finish. Like I'll make, like once I have the dimensions of things worked out. Like with this one, I drew it out on butcher paper and like worked it all out so that as I was making the pieces, I would flip them up to make sure that it lined up the way I wanted it to. But you know, like if I can tack something like this together in a day, that's a worthwhile experiment. And I've been doing this for long enough that I trust my instincts. I know it's worth it to take these sort of chances that like even if I've started off in a direction that's not necessarily a good, like a productive direction, I adapt as I go and sort of change things, so I end up turning the things I'm working on into something that's usually, at the end of it, I feel like it was worthwhile. So it's.
Where can people find out about your work?
Oh, on my website, GideonWeisz.com.
There we go. Cool.
And yeah, I'll put things up as I work on them.
All right. Well, that's great. Well, thank you very much, Gideon.
Sure. Good to see you, Chris.
Can you touch it?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, these are interactive.
Oh, cool! They spin? Is that one made of rubber?
They're all printed of plastic from the 3D printer.
So that's the same as that?
Oh wow! So that. Oh yeah.
Do you want to? Yeah. Do you want to try the larger one?
Put down the little. Okay. 2 hands.